Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith. Today, I am talking about The Death's Head Tavern and Other Fantastic Tales by Nancy A. Collins. This is a story collection, and, I'm going to read back cover copy because that's just easier for me, and I'm lazy. This collection of dark heroic fantasy pastiches and historical fantasy stories features such well known characters as Solomon Kane, Elric, Prince Coram, Robin Hood, and Captain Ahab. It also includes the short novel Absalom's Wake, which asks the question, what if instead of writing Moby Dick, Herman Melville created the Cthulhu mythos? So there you go, that's your nutshell. And for the too long didn't watch crowd, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really liked this. Now, before we get into the book itself, this is the third book in my mystery book bundle. For those who don't know, occasionally I do these book bundles where I choose 5 books that have something in common. The first one I ever did was 5 books that had been made into movies. So now this is the third book in what I'm calling the mystery book bundle, because I have not revealed what it is that these 5 books have in common. That is for you, the viewer, to figure out for yourself. So, with that being said, let's get into this book. It's right off the bat. We have an introduction. We don't need to worry about that. I guess I could just look at the table of contents. Hopefully I'll remember what's what. So our first story is Ahab, Monster Hunter. And this takes place back in the day in the Canadian wilderness. Our main characters are trappers. Something happens. Captain Ahab shows up because he's a monster hunter. I don't want to say too much about it, except that, and this is going to give something away to some of the viewers, it does have one of my favorite creatures in this. Now, I will also say there's something that Nancy Collins did. Slight spoiler, perhaps. So we learned that Ahab essentially made a deal with the devil, and he is responsible for hunting down, I don't recall the number, but let's just say 100 monsters. I don't think that's the number. I don't remember what it was. So Ahab has made a deal with the devil. He's got to hunt down, again, I'm saying 100 monsters. What Nancy Collins could have done, and what seems to me would be the thing a lot of authors would have done, is have, when Ahab shows up and he's going to help these trappers and he explains who he is and what he's doing, he could have been like, and this is my 100th monster. Once I catch this monster, I'm done. I'm free. Nancy Collins doesn't do that. She does something different. So I'm not going to say specifically what, but I really like that she didn't go down what I would consider to be the easy path, the trope path. But that's Ahab Monster Hunter. All right. See, now I have to take a look just to make sure. Some of these, I'm not 100% sure. So the next story is The Sign of the Silver Hand, which is a Prince Coram story. And so Prince Coram is a Michael Moorcock character. Michael Moorcock, I would say, best known for his Elric series, but Prince Coram is another character that he wrote, who I believe had a few books. The interesting thing about this to me is it takes place in 1995, and we actually start a bit epistolary with newspaper articles. So right off the bat, the very first thing, from the New York Times, March 12th, 1995, amateur archaeologist sets off in search of fabled lost city. And so we read that article, and then there's a couple more, and then we get into the meat of the tale, which is about this amateur archaeologist. And it's going to tie in to the Prince Coram stories of Michael Moorcock. Now, going into this book, I was thinking there are a number of ways to, for lack of a better term, judge the stories. One, if you are familiar with the characters or the writer that she is taking from, does it feel like that character's story? So, let's say Solomon Kane, which is the reason, one of the main reasons I bought this book at this time, is because Solomon Kane, I'm a huge fan. Does her Solomon Kane story feel like a Solomon Kane story? The other thing would be, if you're not at all familiar with the character that she's writing about, does the story still work? Again, if I'd never read Solomon Kane before, didn't know anything about the character, will the Solomon Kane story in this book, will it work as simply I'm reading an adventure short story, or will I be lost? Will I not know what's going on or who these people are? Because I've never read Solomon Kane before. Two different criteria that one could use in judging these stories. And then I feel like there was a third one and it just flew out of my head. Old age can sometimes be a problem. If I think of it, I'll bring it up again. But anyway, so I had never read any Prince Coram, so I can't say whether or not this emulates Michael Moorcock's Prince Coram stories. I can say that it works completely fine on its own. If you've never heard of Prince Coram, if you've never read a Prince Coram story, you're not going to be lost when you're reading this. I did make a bit of a mistake. When I started reading this, I Googled Prince Coram and read some stuff about the character before I finished the story. But I don't think that changes the fact that you could read it with no knowledge and still enjoy it as this pulpy adventure story with an interesting character. So that is The Sign of the Silver Hand, a Prince Coram story. And then, next up we have The One-Eyed King, which I believe is the Robin Hood story. So let's jump to that. And An Unknown Tale of Robin Hood. I very much enjoyed this one. I'm not the biggest Robin Hood scholar, or any type of Robin Hood scholar. I've seen the Disney animated movie. I've seen Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. I've seen Robin Hood Men in Tights. I know the basics of Robin Hood and his merry men and Sherwood Forest and the Sheriff of Nottingham and rob from the rich and give to the poor, all of that stuff. This is a story that takes place after King Richard has returned. Robin has had his rightful title and lands and everything restored to him. He's married to Marian, Maid Marian. And then something horrific happens in Sherwood Forest. Robin needs to investigate, and I can't say any more without giving the game away. But I will say, I believe this is the story that made me go, oh yes, this is very much an adult horror writer, because some of the things that happen in here are quite horrific. Very, not extreme in the sense that every tiny little detail is described, but the descriptions of some of the things that happen are, well, incredibly well written, horrible things. So definitely this is adult material. But that's the Robin Hood story. Very much enjoyed it. So then The Heart of the Dragon is the Elric story. It's just An Untold Tale of Elric. Again, I think I read one Elric book, didn't get into it. It's a series I'd like to give another shot. But this is a story I think that takes place somewhere within what Michael Moorcock wrote. And Elric still he needs to take back his lands, save his love, and he thinks that one of the things he can do to do this is find this hidden valley of the dragons, make a deal for a dragon army. Things happen. Once again, I cannot say how much this feels like an Elric story, because I've only read one, and that was so long ago I don't even remember anything about it. But I can say, if you have never read Elric, again, this works. And there's some adult stuff going on. Not quite as graphic as in the Robin Hood story, but it's still a very fun story, and I think if you're an Elric fan, I think you'd enjoy this. There's always probably some purists that are like, no, that's not what Michael Moorcock would do or say. After that, we have The Ice Wedding, and this is some sort of fairy tale. Let's see, find the page. A true fairy tale is what it says. This is my least favorite story in the book, and that's not to say that it's a bad story. It just happens to be my least favorite. Something has to be the least favorite. And this takes place in ancient Russia. I'm not sure exactly what years this is supposed to be. Anna Ivanovna, or Novna, I don't know. The Empress and autocrat of all the Russias. Here's about one of her people, one of her higher-ups, and they have done something that she is not happy about, and so she calls them home, because they're in Italy or someplace, calls them home, and essentially makes them a court jester. And so it's what happens, what is going on in this Russian court, what is happening with this person who is being demeaned, and then then she gets another horrible idea, another way to torture this person, and I can't go into details because that's the story. I had a lot of trouble with the Russian names. It's not like I'm even saying them out loud, but I do want to pronounce stuff properly when I'm reading it. But that's fine. That's just me. It's a fun, interesting, reads like a fairy tale. Just happens to be my least favorite. Then we get to The Death's Head Tavern, which is the Solomon Kane story. This is what I'm here for. I mean, I am a Nancy Collins fan, but Solomon Kane. In this, takes place at the Death's Head Tavern, and Solomon Kane shows up, talks to another patron that's there with his daughter, and talks to the owner of the tavern. He gets something to eat and drink, all that. And then things happen. Solomon Kane-y, horror-y things. Once again, if you've never read Solomon Kane, if you don't know who the character is, you'll have no problem with this story. If you like this pulpy kind of stuff, I think you're going to enjoy this story. And it does tie into some actual history, some actual European history. I'm not going to say what it is, because that would give the game away. My only problem with this story is that there are elements to it that seem to crib, if memory serves, from an actual Robert E. Howard Solomon Kane story. And it has been a long time since I've read the original Robert E. Howard Solomon Kane stories, but there's one that I believe I'm remembering correctly, and this story in part feels very much like that story. Not completely, but there's just elements, one element in particular. But still a story well worth reading. Love me some Solomon Kane. That's the Death's Head Tavern. That's the title story. And then that's followed by Absalom's Wake. And this is the novella. And we're following a young man whose whose uncle had been a whaler until he lost both legs, I think. Has come, and then it comes to stay with his sister and her son, who is, uncle, nephew. And so this young man grows up, wants to follow in his uncle's footsteps, and so eventually his uncle gives him this pendant that has a story behind it. Can't get into it, but this young man goes, finds the captain that his uncle had sailed with, and says, "Hey, can I be on the ship?" Yes, he joins the crew. And so we do get a lot of whaling. This is supposed to be a Herman Melville story. So there's a lot of whaling going on. I don't think it's nearly as thick and dry as Herman Melville. I've never read Moby Dick. I've read maybe a few pages or passages here and there. But I believe that, like, in the middle of the book, there's like 800 pages that's just about whaling. Yes, that's an exaggeration. So there's a lot of whaling stuff, and it might bother some people because it does get graphic in what they do to the whales. But we're also getting these Lovecraftian touches. Weird things start happening, and then even weirder things and more graphic things. Possibly much more graphic than Lovecraft ever got. But as it says on the back cover, what if instead of writing Moby Dick, Herman Melville created the Cthulhu mythos? And what better place for that creation than on the water? And so it is the longest story in here. Essentially, this says short novel, which, why not just say novella? I don't know. Or novelette, even. I'm not sure of the exact word / page count. But it is a very interesting story. It does take a while to get... it's setting up all the characters, but there's a lot about whaling. But then the weird stuff starts happening, and it escalates. And I very, very much enjoyed it. While I'm not a fan of Herman Melville, I am a fan of the Cthulhu mythos. And it's not an exact cut and paste. It is 95% a new mythos, but that you can see the elements of the actual Cthulhu mythos in the Herman Melville version of the Cthulhu mythos. So those are the stories. Overall, like I said, this is a 4 out of 5, possibly even 4.5. But Goodreads doesn't let you give halves. I enjoyed all of the stories, some more than others. The Solomon Kane, despite what I said about the little thing, probably my favorite, but that's a little biased because I love Solomon Kane. But all of the stories were fun. You don't need to know the characters ahead of time to enjoy the stories. The only one that I can actually speak to about how well she captures a Solomon Kane story, well, I think she very much captured it, especially considering I think part of it feels cribbed from an actual Solomon Kane story. I'm not saying it is, and I'm not trying to call her out or anything. I'm simply saying there's an element in this story that I feel is very similar to an element in a Robert E. Howard Solomon Kane story. But anyway, great stuff. 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5 stars. The Death's Head Tavern and Other Fantastic Tales by Nancy A. Collins. Question for the video: are you familiar with any of these characters? What are your thoughts on any of these characters? As for me, I've pretty much covered that. I know Ahab from Moby Dick, even though I've never read Moby Dick. I think most people are aware. relatively speaking. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the third world, other places, that don't have any clue what Moby Dick or Captain Ahab are, but you know what I'm saying. Um, and so it was interesting to see Ahab in this monster hunter story. I'd heard of Prince Coram, but that's about it. I simply knew Prince Coram was a character written by Michael Moorcock. I have tried Elric. I would like to try again because I did not get into it the first time. Maybe that was a fluke. I'd like to find out. But there are certain editions of the Elric books I want. I have very clear vision of a specific edition of the books, and I really liked those covers. Those are the ones I'm going to be looking for. Robin Hood, again, I've talked about my familiarity, but I'm a bigger fan of King Arthur than of Robin Hood, but still a fine story. The fairy tale one, the Russian one, I have no idea, even though it says a true fairy tale, I have no idea if anybody in the story is actually supposed to be anyone actually from history. I have no basis for any of that. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody, but the Solomon Kane, of course. I'm a huge, huge fan. I have not only the big trade paperback that's the complete Solomon Kane, it's everything Robert E. Howard wrote. I also have some smaller, like mass market size paperbacks that are essentially, it's the same stuff, just a different edition, and not complete, but I love the way the paperbacks look. So I have those as well. So multiple copies of the same stories. I have Solomon Kane comics. I have some Dark Horse stuff. I have the hardback Marvel omnibus of all the Marvel Solomon Kane stuff. And I am very, very excited that in 2026 there will be a brand new Solomon Kane novel. And I believe this will be the first novel-length work of Solomon Kane. Can't wait for that. So that's how I feel about these characters. What about you? Let me know in the comments below. Oh, and I enjoyed the Solomon Kane movie. Not great, but entertaining. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, what you think of these characters, if you're familiar with them, if you've read any of them. Let me know all that in the comments below. And if you have figured out what the secret connection between 5 books in this book bundle, if you figured out that secret connection, put that in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, I'll have links for my Instagram and Blusky in the description below. That's all I have for you. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith. And until next time, read more books.